trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Hello and welcome to the Goldberry Artisans podcast. This is a podcast about my love of knitting and my journey to learning more about wool and fiber and yarn crafting, and about learning as you go and being okay with making mistakes. My name is Emily. I'm coming to you from the beautiful state of Maine, and I am a college student knitting with a college student's budget and time restraints. So yes, welcome to anyone who is new around here. Thank you for checking out my little podcast, and welcome back to any returning viewers. I appreciate you all so much. To those of you who listen to me ramble about yarn and whatever pops into my head as I'm going along. One thing I've noticed is that when I have less time to record, I'm actually more relaxed. When I first started podcasting, I have a little notebook that I would write down show notes in, try to remember everything that I wanted to talk about certain projects. But I realized that once I stopped doing that, it's made the things that I want to talk about that particular project come to mind more readily than when everything was written down and I was just moving through the list. I don't know if you guys ever actually noticed a change. But I know that it's made me a more relaxed podcaster, which has helped me to fit podcasting into my life a little bit more. As I said, I'm a college student. I'm working and taking classes, which doesn't give me a whole lot of time to record. But yeah, anyway, here I am with my tea, my candle in the background, and a big pile of knitting, which actually includes 2 finished objects this week. It's crazy. I didn't have any finished objects last time, so it's exciting. So we'll dive right in with whatever's on top of my pile. I have a finished sweater. This is Telja by Jennifer Steingrass. I'm calling it my Autumn Frost pullover. And I knit this using Plotulopi. I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact colorways. It is a colorwork yoke with some colorwork on the hem and sleeve cuffs, and it's knit from the bottom up. And yes, I had completed most of the knitting for this. The sleeves were done, most of the body was done. All that needed to happen was the colorwork yoke. And I do knit while I read. If you've watched my last few podcasts over the last couple of months, you'll notice that most of my knitting has been easier knitting, which means no color work or heavy textures or anything, because I can't do that while I'm reading. But my birthday was a couple weeks ago, and on that weekend I just sat down, pretended I didn't have homework. My birthday was on a Saturday this year, which was nice. So I just pretended I didn't have homework, sat down, and knocked out almost all of this colorwork yoke. And I love this. And the bind off for the neck is I believe it's called an applied I-cord bind off, which means that it gives it a simple edge. It's not a traditional ribbed sweater neck, but it's also not a stockinette stitch rolled bind off, which I know some people think is too casual, and for me it goes back and forth, depends on the sweater. But I really like the I-cord bind off I've used I-cord on a couple of other different kinds of projects, but I just really love how on this it gives it a nice smooth finish without being too casual. But it also means I don't have to go and pick up stitches for a neckband. So yes, I want to knit more colorwork yoke sweaters. I've been looking at some. I may end up doing another Jennifer Steingass pattern because they are just so gorgeous. I might try a top-down one next time because I've never actually knit a sweater top-down. When I first started knitting sweaters, I knit a couple for my younger siblings, and they were all like knit in pieces, knit flat in pieces from bottom up seamed, which is, so to my mind, that's like the usual way to make sweaters, I guess. And a couple of the sweaters I've knit for myself, I really haven't made that many. I've made like, I'd say 4 sweaters that are wearable and that I do wear, including this one. So, yeah, I've knit 2 bottom up seamed, and then this one was knit in a similar fashion to Telja, where this was knit from the bottom up in the round, and then the sleeves and the body are knit separately and then joined to knit the yoke at the top. And that's how Telja was knit. So I kind of want to try some sort of top-down construction, whether it's color work or something else. But I have all sorts of dreams for sweaters, one of which I'll talk about in a little bit. So, yes, I know I've talked a lot in the past about knitting with the Plotulopi, and I did enjoy it. It was, once you get into a nice rhythm, it just goes so smoothly. With some breakages, but I talked about that more in detail last week. And I did have one question. Somebody asked if it's scratchy. Yes, it is. But what I'm hoping, I've heard of some people putting in hair conditioner with their wool soap when they block things they've made with Plotulopi. So I haven't blocked this yet. I had something else blocking, so I haven't been able to block this out. But I'm hoping that will help to soften it up. And even if it doesn't, I generally wear at least a tank top under sweaters, no matter what they're made out of. And for this is going to be more of a sort of like rugged, wear it like a coat sort of sweater, because it is knit. It's a worsted weight sweater, and it's like thick, warm wool. And so I'll probably wear a t-shirt under it anyway. So then if I get too warm, I can take it off. So then the only place that the yarn will be right against my skin would be on my sleeves and potentially around my neck, and I'm fine with that. So I have not woven in the ends yet. I honestly haven't decided if I'm going to, because what I discovered while I was grafting the underarm seams, Plotulopi breaks apart when it's tugged. It is unspun wool, so there's no twist in it at all, which means that I just have to pull very lightly and it will come apart. So when you're trying to, so I had most of the breakage issues when I was knitting it, when I was doing magic loop for the sleeves, because you had to tug in between the 2 needles to make sure I didn't end up with a jog, like a line in between where the needles were. And so, and also when I tried to seam the underarms or graft them together, it was interesting because I wanted to make sure that, it looked nice, but also that I wasn't pulling really tight and then breaking my yarn partway through grafting live stitches. Although the stitches wouldn't go anywhere because this is such a grippy wool, but I didn't want to have to deal with that if I could help it. And I think they turned out, the underarm grafting turned out well. You can't even really see it. But I don't really want to try to weave in the ends all that much. I may just tie them in a knot and leave them alone and let the wool do its magic and just sort of stay. Because this wool like, it's not going anywhere. If I ever had a stitch slide off the needle, it didn't move at all. Sometimes with slicker wools, you know, it'll start to unravel right away. This one, that did not happen. So, hoping that if I just leave the ends alone, they'll be fine. I may try to weave in this end that's on the I-cord bind off, because it is a little bumpy, it's a little obvious, and there's a little bit of a hole where the applied I-cord bind off started, so I may try to weave in that one, but not really the other ones. But here, I guess I can show you what the inside looks like. So as you can see, some of my floats like are super loose because I did not catch them. Usually in color work knitting, I will catch floats depending on what weight of yarn, but typically if it's going to be more than 4 stitches, sometimes 5, I will catch the yarn. Just kind of cross it over, cross the yarn that's being floated across the back, cross it over the working yarn, and carry that along so that it doesn't make a big loop. I tried that for a little bit on the bottom of the sleeve cuffs, which is the first thing that the pattern instructs you to knit. That was not happening because I had to move the entire, move the plate of yarn over, but then had to readjust it back so that I was holding them in the correct hands. It was not worth that with this yarn, with being prone to breaking. So I just didn't catch floats, which means that I end up with some pretty loose ones. But if these were mittens, I'd be more worried about it, but it's a sweater, like I'm not going to get my fingers stuck in the floats around the neck. So, and some of them, like in this purple section, turned out so nice. When I was little, I had this fascination with clothing tags that had multiple colors in them, you know, like inside a shirt or something, because of all the floats across the back. I had no idea what they were called then, but I used to love to rub it in between my hands. I loved how that felt. So now I like to go back over my floats and see how they turned out. And I don't remember, somebody posted on Instagram a while ago talking about how they loved the wrong side of color work, and I commented talking about that, and somebody else said, oh my goodness, I love those too. So at least I'm not alone. So yeah, I'll update you a little bit more so far as the yarn and how it holds up. But from how it feels, I'm sure this is going to be a very rugged, hardy sweater that I can wear anywhere and not worry about it. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. And I'll talk about it in a little bit. I'm using Flow to Low for a second project already. So yes, it is scratchy, but if you're looking for something rugged and that can handle a lot of wear, I would definitely say, just so far, that this definitely could. As long as you are either going to wear something underneath it or are not bothered by kind of scratchy, itchy wool. That's one thing that the longer I've been knitting, the more I learn about wool, I appreciate that more. You know, when you're little and you have something that's been knit and it's kind of scratchy, you don't like it. But when I was little, those things were knit in generally with acrylic yarn that just wasn't very soft. But I hardly ever use acrylic yarn anymore. I just like working with wool more than any other fiber, more than plant fibers or even other animal fibers. So now when I knit things that other people would feel it and go, oh, why would you make that? It's itchy. I can get cheaper yarn that's softer at whatever big box store. But for me, it's learning how to suit the yarn to the project and how I'm going to use that item. For this is really going to be an outerwear garment, like in the fall and in the spring when it's too warm for a big winter coat but cool enough that I need something on top. So I can take a little bit of an itchy wool if it's going to be really warm. So that's just sort of been my process, and which is why, honestly, when I first started knitting, it was a lot of gift knitting. I knit for everybody I knew, even if it was an awful project, and I was just so excited about it. But now I do a lot of selfish knitting. You know, I knit for myself most of the time because the yarns that I want to use, I don't know if anyone else would actually enjoy wearing them. Like Plotulopi, I don't really know if anybody else that I know would enjoy wearing it, or if it would just be something where they'd say thank you and stuffed on the back of their closet and never look at it again. So that's me and my wool fiber journey so far. My other finished object, it's even blocked. The ends are woven in. I haven't clipped them yet, but you have not seen this because this is a test knit for Lily of Nordic Stitches, and the pattern is coming out on December 1st. And Lily has started posting some photos of it, so I can show you now. This is the Humbug Shawl, as I said, by Lily of Nordic Stitches. I never did give this another name. I guess I was trying to keep it so secret. And this is knit using hand spun, not my own. Let's see if I have the tag for the... But the fiber that it was spun out of is from Alexander's Craft. I don't really know if you can see that. alexandrascrafts.com. It is a hand-dyed fiber, 50% merino, 25% bamboo, and 25% silk in the wine colorway. And I knew when I got this yarn that I would want to use it because of that blend. I wanted it to be something, I knew that it would be so nice and drapey and airy, and so a shawl would be perfect. And then I went back and forth on whether or not I was going to use a second color for the edging. In the pattern, Lily has two samples, and one of them was done all in one color on a smaller needle size. The other one was knit on a larger needle size with a different color on the edge. And I had another yarn that I was originally thinking of using, but when it came time to do it, I didn't really like it. So I went with another hand spun yarn, a little bit of hand spun yarn that I had, and there's some purple in it that matches this purple almost exactly. And I believe the hand spun on the edging, it's Blue Moon Fiber Arts Polworth, and I don't know exactly what the fiber content is on that. But this shawl, it grew quite a bit when I blocked it out because of the lace stitch. It was a bit smaller than this. But it is so drapey and light and soft. I love it. And when I blocked it, when I originally finished knitting the edging, it was almost like it didn't have these nice points. But the wonders of blocking, I just made sure to pin out these little points, these triangles, well, diamonds, I guess. And I think that turned out really nicely. And at first I wasn't too sure about this edging yarn. I kind of wanted something that was in a solid color to make it more of like a, I don't know, more of a dressy shawl, I guess. Because this is a variegated yarn, so it looks a little bit more casual, but I kind of like that because that's sort of more my style. I like dressy casual. I don't really normally dress super formal, but I wear like skirts and like blouses and fancier tops more often than just like solid color t-shirts or anything like that. So this really is perfect. So yeah, this pattern will be released in December 1st. And oh, I forgot to explain, it's called the Humbug Shawl because if you know anything about A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, Scrooge, the main character, is always saying bah humbug. He's not a fan of Christmas when the story begins, and bah humbug is sort of like his line to dismiss anything about Christmas. So this will be coming out just in time to knit for Christmas. So I'm just so excited to be able to show this to you and to be able to wear it. And I think I will wear this a lot. So I love this color purple. And speaking of Lily, Lily of Nordic Stitches is holding a frozen winter mystery knit along that will also be starting on December 1st. And I went back and forth trying to pick the colors that I wanted to use for it, because she suggests using, there's two colors, she suggests using either tonal yarns or very lightly speckled or variegated, but not self-striping, nothing heavily variegated, because it would detract from whatever was going on in the pattern. So the yarns that I have chosen for Lily's mystery cowl, I went back and forth because she recommends using either tonal or lightly speckled yarns, but nothing, like not really variegated or anything, because that will detract from the pattern, because you need two colors. And I thought about buying new yarn, and then I realized I have way too much yarn, I need to use what I have. So I decided on these two colors. This is Knit Picks Palette, which is a fingering weight yarn, 231 yards to 50 grams. It's 100% Peruvian Highland wool. So this dark, it's a super dark brown, not really black. But this color is Bittersweet Heather, and this is Iris Heather. They're both lovely heathered tones. And I had this left over from another project, but the brown I had used in this sweater. See, I pulled this out to talk about something else later, and I keep pulling it out. But I finally washed it after like a year, and it softened up so much, and it got a lot drapier, so I knew that this would make a good shawl. So like when I first started knitting, I would have just picked any two yarns whose colors I liked and thrown them together, and not really thought about what the yarns were made out of or how they would behave next to each other. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't knit with two totally different types of yarn, so I just decided on these two. And I figured there's plenty of contrast. I don't need to worry about them blending in to each other. So I'm excited. I've never done a mystery knit along before, and after knitting Lily's Humbug Shawl, and I really enjoyed that, so I'm excited to work on another Nordic Stitches pattern. My next work in progress, sort of, long term, is my Cozy Memories blanket. Since I talked to you last, this was the last square I talked about, so the rest of that row and the two subsequent rows. And as I've done before, I'll post a photo on Instagram, just going through some of the dyers and yarn companies. I'm sorry if you are interested in a particular yarn that you see me hold up and you're not on Instagram. I will post the photos in my show notes on my blog at Goldberry Artisans. I haven't done that before, but maybe I should. Also, I'll post the photos, and if you are interested in one of the yarns, you can comment and ask, and I'll be sure to reply. But I'm not going to list them all out on there, because I don't know if anybody wants to know. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time listing out every single yarn if nobody's really interested. But if you are, you can go over there and comment in case you're not on Instagram. But I did want to talk about just a couple of the yarns in here. One of them is this gorgeous orange. This colorway is called the Great Pumpkin, as in the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown Halloween special little movie. And this is from Knitted Wit. I just love it. And then another Knitted Wit yarn actually is this one. This colorway is called Winter Berries, and I really love it. I wish that I could get some. I need to check to see if she has any up to make some Christmas socks. I've never knit Christmas socks before, but I love this yarn because it has some different shades of green and then like a red and a pink and some silver. So they're Christmassy without being like hit you over the head Christmas, so I can wear them all year. Because I don't like to keep around clothes that I only wear like for a very small, like a couple weeks out of the year. So, I love Christmas, but I don't really want to wear red and green stripes in like, you know, cool morning in July. And, oh, something else I've decided to do, I've thought that when I do a swap now, instead of like trying to fit the yarns in and see what matches perfectly, I gave up on that. So I'm just going to do a row. So like these yarns I received in a swap. This is really awkward to hold up. So like this row is all from the same person that I did a swap with. And this yarn is all from the same person. So then I can keep them together. And I actually started that because of these 4 yarns. These are Hamilton themed yarns. I don't think I've really talked about it a lot on here, but I love Hamilton. It's a Broadway musical, in case you haven't listened to it. There is some swear words and adult content a little bit, which isn't usually what I listen to, but I just love Hamilton so much. I ignore those parts. But just don't listen to it for the first time around your kids, maybe. But yeah, I love these yarns. And these were from a swap, and I never talked about Hamilton before, so I was super excited. Or on the podcast, I never talked about it, so I was super excited to see these. So this one is, I put them in order of, like, song order. They're all named after songs in Hamilton. I'm going to make sure I get this right. So so this is the first one, even though it's farther in. Because I figured these two would play better together than this one and this square. So this yarn is Young, Scrappy, and Hungry. It's from Lamb Woman Knits. This is, wait for it, these next 3 are all from Brew City Yarns. So this is Wait for It. This is Room Where It Happened. No, sorry. This is World Turned Upside Down. And this one is Room Where It Happened. I just love those. And I want to like buy full skeins of them and put them in some sort of project now. So, because what I love about this blanket is doing swaps, you get introduced to some cool yarns that I never would have heard of, or new to me dyers. So yeah, that is my cozy memories, and I'm close to having this be a square because I've got 10 squares across and I'm on my 9th row. So close to having it squared off. So far it's like perfect for draping over my lap size. I haven't decided if I'm going to go back in and add squares onto the side or anything once I get going, but I'm just going to keep going on this, see how it goes. This is my project where I am letting go of any of my perfectionist tendencies or my desire to plan everything out way ahead of time, which is what I try to do with like anything else in my life. Because when I first started it, I was more worried about like what yarns I was putting next to each other. But as I've gone on, I've realized in the whole effect, when you back up, you can't like, you're not looking at these 2 squares to see if you like how they look together. You're seeing it in the context of the whole blanket. And so it's okay if they don't look perfect next to each other. And this is also sort of like my in-between projects. I've been working on this. Like I showed you, I have 2 finished objects. And then I have my socks that are just sort of perpetually on the needles. And I don't really have any other big projects right now. I've done a swatch that I'll talk about in a little bit. And I have another project that I worked on, that I cast on the other day. But like I don't really have any other bigger projects on the needles. Because I'm sort of holding off till the mystery knit along starts up. But in the past that would have kind of thrown me. And I would have really maybe like lost my knitting, I guess you'd call it knitting mojo or inspiration or whatever. And kind of stopped knitting for a little, and kind of stopped knitting for a little while, or cast something on out of just the desire to have something to work on, and then ended up ripping it out because I didn't really like it, didn't really like the pattern and yarn combo or whatever, because I hadn't really thought it out. I was just casting on out of desperation. And like I have a Q Unravelry where I have different things listed for what I want to make with what yarns, but a lot of them right now are bigger sweater projects that I wouldn't want to be swatching for, and I cannot throw a swatch in my bag and expect that to last me for 2 hours of studying in the library. So this has been my go-to to kind of keep me keep me going. Keep the, kind of keep the momentum going with knitting. Yeah, I just love my blanket. I have a pair of socks that are just sort of there. Not really working on them. They're Grand Central socks by Mina Phillips. You can watch my previous episodes or go on my Ravelry project page to see that, but I'm not going to bother pulling those out and talking about them right now. I haven't made any progress. But this next project, I cast it on yesterday. I want to make sure that I get all of the pattern information correct. But I finished my sweater in Plotulopi, and then I used Plotulopi to immediately cast on for a different project. And this is so I'm using 2 colors of Plotulopi, and the pattern is Blat by Sabine F on Ravelry. Her Instagram username, I don't know how to say it, I'll put it on the screen, is Frizzaby Knits. Sorry, I don't know. But it's a beautiful colorwork pattern with these gorgeous leaves. I don't know if I'm going to add a pom-pom on top or not. I knit all of this yesterday. I watched a couple of Hallmark movies. My sister was home for Thanksgiving and she loves Hallmark movies, so we watched a couple yesterday with my little sisters, so I knit all of this yesterday. And then I did something, I haven't done this on any other hat ever, but I was watching Maria of Ninja Chickens the other day, and she's doing a test knit, and that pattern, I believe it's a hat, I believe it was possibly knit from the top down, and then there's sort of like a turning row, and then you're knitting a lining, which will also, so it'll be reversible. And I thought that would be a really great thing to do with this Plotulopi yarn, because I don't know if I'm going to keep this or give this as a gift or anything. I like to keep around some things like hats and socks, just have them knit and not wear them. Because then if I need a quick gift for somebody, then I can use that. The past few years, I haven't even done the whole Christmas knitting, haven't even gone there. So I love Plotulopi, I love working in it, it's great for color work, but I wasn't sure if somebody else who's not me would tolerate, like I talked about earlier, the scratchy, rough, crunchy texture of this hat. Although my little sister was sitting next to me while I was working on it. She's 9. But she was touchy. She was like, oh, that feels cool. So, doing great on that front. But anyway, so I did a provisional cast on, and then I knit this hat. I was not about to experiment with knitting a hat from the top down for the first time with a colorwork hat and reversing the instructions, and all I wanted was some relaxing knitting. So I did a provisional cast on, knit the hat, and I have now gone back and picked up from the brim, and I am using Quince & Co. Lark, which is their worsted weight base. And now I've been trying to figure out if I want to knit a whole inner lining, or if I just want to do like a brim and maybe a little bit farther, because that's really the only part that's going to be making skin contact, because once it gets past, because that'll be the part that's right here along the forehead and around your ear, but then once it gets past that, it's all in the back of your head, and so that part, you don't really feel that. So I may not do a whole, because I'm not aiming for this to be reversible or anything, although that would be cool. Maybe I'll have to try that sometime. But I may just knit the brim in a little bit. I'll see how far I get on this, and then decide what I want to do. And again, there is a little bit of a hole in the top. Because of the Plotulopi, I was worried about it breaking. I did not want to tug when I was pulling the stitches in. Did my best, but came out with a little bit of a hole. So I may put a pom-pom on there just because of that. But I've just been craving color work since I finished my sweater. Color work has not been something I've been able to do. Like I talked about, I can't really do it while I read unless it's like the same thing every single round. Which this is not, obviously. So it was nice to just sit down over Thanksgiving break. Here in the US, we just celebrated Thanksgiving, so I didn't have to go to work, didn't have to go to school. So to just be able to sit down and get some beautiful color work done. So yeah, it's a super fast pattern. I did go down to size 6 needles. The pattern recommends size 4 for the brim, size 7 for the body. I did 4 for the brim and 6 for the body, just because that's what I had on hand, the needles that I had on hand to use. And I think it turned out fine. Oh, let's see, I've never tried a hat on with the needles in the bottom. Yeah, it's not going to work. I did try it on yesterday, and it fits nice and snugly, so. But it's still pretty wide and loose, even with being knit with size 6. And I will probably block this before I sew in this lining that I'm doing, so that I can see if it'll stretch out at all. I may try to stretch it vertically a little bit, just to help that color work really, pop. So, we'll see. Yeah, that is my other work in progress right now. So that's all of that I'm currently knitting. I do want to talk about a swatch. So there is a tunic pattern that I've had my eye on ever since the pattern came out. It is the Great Falls pattern by Pam Allen, who is published through Quince & Co. And this came out winter 2 years ago, and I fell in love with it. It just looks so comfortable, so easy to wear. Throw it on with some leggings. I mean, I like leggings, they're comfortable, but I like to wear longer things on top of them. So that would be perfect. Nice tunic, nice quick, cozy winter project. So, and then I had some yarn that I had heard about on another podcast that I wanted to try out around the same time. And the yarn company sold a bulky weight yarn. Although now I'm realizing I think it's Aran weight. Oops. But I finally, after finishing my Telgla sweater, finally sat down and knit a swatch. So it is knit on size 15 needles, which this yarn is not really a true bulky. Like it's pretty see-through, which I wear tank tops under everything anyway, so that shouldn't be an issue with so far as being a little bit see-through. But the yarn is from the Imperial Stock Ranch, so Imperial Yarns, and this is their Columbia base, which is an Aran weight. This is 4 ounces. It's a 2-ply yarn. Now the tags say that there are 200 yards in each skein, but when I went on Ravelry to add this project to my page, it said there was 170 yards, which will basically affect how long I can make this, depending on which one of those numbers is accurate and correct. Because this is knit from the top down, and there are instructions either for a tunic or a dress length. So basically, I will knit until I run out of yarn, and save a little bit of yarn for the pockets, because it has pockets. So I'll knit if it's 200 plus yards. If it's 200 yards in each skein, then I'll have enough for the dress. If it isn't, I'll have enough for the tunic. So I bought these. I don't remember how much I got them for. I bought these 5 skeins on Ravelry D-Stash. I hand wound them the other day, and then I knit a swatch. I blocked it, dried it. I have not taken the blocked gauge. I measured what my gauge was before I blocked it, just to see how much it would grow. And then I have not yet taken the unblocked gauge, because it just finished drying earlier, yesterday. So I want to let it rest, settle for a little bit, and then measure it and see what it is. So the timing is slightly ironic with this sweater, because lately I've been thinking that I need to make myself some more lightweight sweaters, some more fingering weight. I only have one fingering weight sweater, which is this one that I've kept pulling up. And this is fingering weight, and this is probably my most worn sweater because it's not an outer layer, it's just a sweater that I can wear all the time. I can wear it inside, no problems. And yeah, so I need to make more fingering weight sweaters. The other 3 sweaters I've knit are worsted weight. Oh, I was wrong. I've knit myself 5 sweaters. And this is fingering weight. The other 4 are worsted weight sweaters. And then this would be a bulky garment. So I do need to work on fingering weight sweaters, but I figured I have this yarn. I've been wanting to make this tunic, and I know I will wear it. So, yeah. So I'm going to make this. But I do need to work on making fingering weight sweaters. But I had originally pulled this out to talk about how I knit my gauge swatch. So, Great Falls tunic is knit in the round. So, to get an accurate gauge for a project that's in the round, that's all knitting. But most of the time when you do gauge swatch for another project, you are, like for a flat project, you're going back and forth. So if you want stockinette, you're knitting a row, purl a row, knit a row, purl a row, etc. But when you're creating a garment in the round, you're knitting every round to get stockinette stitch. So knitting a swatch where you knit a row then purl a row is not going to be an accurate representation of your gauge. Some people purl the same as they knit, some people don't. I don't really know if I do or not, but at the same time, you don't want to cast on, enough stitches to make a cowl for a gauge swatch, because then you're using up a lot more yarn and a lot more time. When you may need that yarn for your project, then you have to rip it out. And if the yarn's already been blocked and your project hasn't been blocked, then that can be an issue. So instead, I first learned this swatching in the round technique from this sweater pattern. This is a Brooklyn tweed pattern, and they always include a whole lot of extra notes and tips and tricks at the end of the pattern. And when I was swatching for this color work. And so what you do, instead of like trying to knit it magic loop or DPNs, but if that's not how you're going to knit the finished garment, then that can affect your gauge. Instead, there are plenty of tutorials for this online, but you knit a row, and if you're knitting on a circular needle, you just slide the stitches over to the other needle, and you carry the yarn across the back, leaving a nice big loop, and then you knit the next row. Move the stitches to the other side of your cable needle and knit another row. That way you're knitting every row, and you end up with these big loops on the back side of the swatch, which after, when you go to block it, you can cut them. So originally, this was all connected. These little yarn ends were all connected in loops that I cut so then I could swatch it flat, so I could block the swatch flat. But that way, you get a better representation of your gauge when you're knitting every row, but not doing magic loop, not using double pointed needles, just knitting every round. But what I ended up doing, I do not have a size 15 circular needle. I have bought one and it's coming in the mail, but I wanted to do this swatch before I bought it. So I only have size 15 straight needles. So what I would do, like after I had knit a row and my stitches were on here, so the yarn is down here. And so normally you would have to go to purl the next row. I would slide all of the stitches over onto my next needle and knit the next row. And just kind of keep doing that. Thankfully, it doesn't take very long to knit a swatch this size on size 15 needles, so it wasn't that much of a pain. Did it while watching a Christmas movie. So yes, so that's how I swatch in the round. For whatever reason, I did not do that for Telja. I just didn't really swatch. Just kind of went with it. But that's because I went a size up in the pattern anyway from what I would usually do, because I wanted that to be an oversized sweater that I can put on top of clothes. And I also wanted to see what fabric this would make, because I've never used this yarn. haven't really ever seen anybody work with it much. So I wanted to get that all set. And for this sweater, I did it because this is more of a slim, like a more fitted sweater. So I wanted to make sure my gauge was good on this one. So yeah, this yarn, this is this Knit Picks palette, which is like a super inexpensive yarn. But it's held up really well. I wear this all the time, and there's been hardly any pilling. Like very small amounts under the arms, like along the side of the body and under the arms where the arm rubs against the body of the sweater. But that's it. I really have not had any issues with this sweater. And I finally washed it, which made it softer and drapier. It wasn't super rough before, but it wasn't like the softest yarn. I had to wash it. I kept thinking, oh, I'll do it later. But my parents and I went out for breakfast on my birthday. And we went to this super cute little town nearby, and a really cute diner, sort of restaurant cafe place. So cute. I don't have any pictures or anything because I just always forget to take pictures when I'm doing things. But I ordered a waffle, and I was getting like some real maple syrup with it, some Maine maple syrup, which came in a little container, a little like tiny picture on the plate. So I'm sitting like against the wall. The waitress is coming over here, and she comes to set my waffle down in front of me, and she was like, "Oh, and here's for the birthday girl," and the syrup tipped and spilled all over me. I was wearing this sweater. It got all over the front, like the bottom part of my sweater, and then mostly and a lot on my skirt. So she felt so bad. She brought out like some warm water on some rags to help clean it up and get everything unstickified. But it was hilarious. I just couldn't help but laugh. But then I really did have to finally get around to washing this sweater. So, yeah, that is how I finally found out how drapey Knit Picks palette gets when it's been washed. And speaking of sweater necks, this one, I talked about the applied I-cord on the Telga sweater. This one is a reverse stockinette stitch, sort of rolled brim. But it almost has the same sort of effect as an I-cord because it's rolling in. Because of the reverse stockinette. So I like that sweater neck too. So what I've learned through my past few sweater projects is it's kind of gone along. My sweater knitting has changed and has gone along with my overall just figuring out what I like to wear and what I wear most often, because like I talked about in my last episode, sometimes I have Dream Emily and what Dream Emily wears, but that's not really what real Emily wears. So just figuring out, okay, what kind of sweaters do I wear? So I tend to wear lighter weight sweaters. I'll reach for my store-bought sweaters on slightly warmer days when it's still cool enough for a sweater but not warm enough for a really big one. So just working on figuring out what exactly I wear. Sort of my journey. I mean, I'm only 22, so I'm definitely figuring everything out still. Very much so. And my knitting has kind of gone along with that, which is sort of why I've done more like knitting for myself than gift knitting, because I'm still sort of trying to figure out, I'll knit a project but then realize, oh, I never really wore that because of this. Not just, oh, I never really wore that because I don't know why, but realizing, okay, maybe it was the color, maybe it was the yarn or the style of it. It's just not a style that's practical or that looks good on me. So just sort of figuring out what I actually wear and what I'm comfortable in. My sweater knitting and dream sweater knitting has sort of changed. So that's it for knitting. I just have a few things that I'll list off that have been making me happy lately, and then I'll say goodbye. The first is Thanksgiving break. It was so nice to just put away the homework and relax. In case you don't live in the U.S., you may have heard of Thanksgiving that we celebrate here is just a day where most people get the day off from work, and we always gather together with family and just enjoy spending time together, eating delicious food, relaxing, and then the rest of the weekend we watch some Christmas movies, because that's just what you do, or what we do anyway. So I had caught up on homework beforehand, and so I was able to just relax and knit and visit, which was so nice. So that was definitely something that's been making me happy lately. Something else, a book that I started reading over Thanksgiving break is Mr. Rochester by Sara Shoemaker, which, if you've ever read or watched Jane Eyre, then you know Mr. Rochester is the hero of sorts of that story. And I'm normally pretty hesitant when it comes to sequels or retellings or anything like that of classic books, like Jane Austen. There are so many Jane Austen retellings or stories like from the minor character's point of view. But this was one, and I just don't normally like those, but this is one that I'd heard different people who really read a lot. One of them was Anne Bogle from the Modern Mrs. Darcy blog and What Should I Read Next podcast, which I love. Get so many book recommendations from there. But she recommended this book, as well as, I'm blanking on her name, the Knitting the Stash podcast, which I recently started watching and love. I think she mentioned this book on a recent podcast episode, and so, and she's a university professor. She reads a lot, so it's somebody whose opinion on books I would trust. So I picked up a copy. The Kindle book was on sale, so I picked it up, and I'm really enjoying it so far. Speaking of podcasts, I've really enjoyed some of the Elise Gets Crafty podcasts from this fall. And I'm sure a lot of you listen to that podcast. And Elise will usually interview some sort of small business owner. But this fall she's been doing what she calls maker chats. And it's been really cool to listen to some of the different people that have been on there. But a couple of my favorites were episode 133, which was a maker chat with Jen Beeman of Greenline Studios, and just hearing Jen talk about how she started Greenline and more about what they make, which was really cool. Greenline Studio, if you don't know, is they make sewing patterns, and if you've heard of the Scout Tee or the Lark Tee, those are Greenline Studio patterns. And then also episode 137 with Amy of Knit Collage. So it was just really cool to hear more about the process that those two makers in particular, but also the other makers that Elise has interviewed. It's just been really cool to learn more about their businesses and their creative processes. So, yeah, that's just sort of what has been making me happy lately. So, it is now dark outside. Oh man, daylight savings. I love that it's light when I go to work in the morning, but it does get really dark really soon. But anyway, I guess I'll have to sit beside my candle and keep knitting. So until I see you next time, I hope that you are making some time to just be creative, and that you are learning as you go and learning to be okay with making mistakes. So until I see you next time, happy creating. Bye.
I see trees of green, red roses too.